Mortal
Realms.
Combat! Dun 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 dun. Copyright. Hello and welcome to Miniatures Rundown, talking for the first time I think on camera since Adepticon, Age of Sigmar 4th edition. Because we can't have Games Workshop games that don't have lots of edition change.
That worked a lot better than I thought. And that's not true, Necromunda.
Don't jinx it! If we don't tell them Necromunda exists, they won't edition change it, Mitchell. So, Age of Sigmar 4th edition is coming. As we know, it's coming in summer. There was kind of an article leak where they said it, like, someone labeled it July and then erased it real quick.
Oh,
so,
no.
You know, whatever, it's coming in the summer.
Yeah, who cares?
They are, of course, drip feed announcing all of the changes. There's been a fair few. We'll talk about those later once we collect more of them. But the one we wanted to talk about, the article we just got today at time of recording, is the changes to combat.
Yes.
I think these combat changes are overall more impactful than the edition changes from 9th to 10th 40k.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
I disagree.
Well, let's talk about what actually changed.
Okay.
Not all of the things that make me think that are in this article. So we'll have to call back to a couple things.
Fair.
So number one, they have already confirmed, this was in a previous article, everyone just has 3-inch combat range.
Yes.
Which I like.
I agree.
One of the worst things about Age of Sigmar was, well, I'm on a 40 mil base, but I only have 1-inch range. No second rank for you.
Yeah. Or I have a 25 mil base in a 1-inch range, which is less than an inch.
So as long as I'm touching the bases together, I can...
Yeah. That was stupid.
It was bad. They've also confirmed 2 things: countercharge,
Yes.
which lets you charge at the end of your opponent's charge phase.
Yep.
And power through, which basically it calls out monsters and chariots, but the way it works is you just roll anything with fewer wounds than you. You can kind of power through units.
Yeah.
I think that has a big importance for something we're going to talk about later.
I do like that.
I do too, because it's like, oh, your unit of clan rats is trying to tie up my Storm Drake.
Wah.
No.
Yeah.
Beep, beep. But today we got a few more things. One of them is not actually a change so much as it is a uber clarification,
Yes.
in that things like charge and fight are now abilities.
Everything is an ability.
Everything's
That's
an
what
ability. That doesn't actually change anything,
No.
except it gives it a very specific timing thing. Every time I see them talk about this, you know what I think about? The stack.
Yeah. Kinda.
Can you explain the stack to those of us?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so how the stack works in Magic.
Magic the Gathering.
Magic the Gathering by Wizards of the Coast.
It's a card game. You might have heard of it.
Basically, whenever anyone goes to do a thing that uses the stack, it goes on the stack, and then it checks whether any player wants to respond to it. And then if they do, it goes above that. And then you can respond to that, and respond to that, and that's why it's called a stack. And they resolve in reverse order. So the last thing to go on the stack, once everybody's okay with it, will come off the stack and resolve, and then go down and resolve. So I can see where you're coming from with that.
It's not quite like that because it actually works the other way, where
Yes.
it's players go in turn order to do abilities. But the reason I say that is because the stack, or rather in Magic the Gathering, the fact that everything is very specific on its timing about when it is executed in relation to everything else is what makes that game function as a game.
True.
It's one of the things that it has that a lot of card games really should borrow. And it sounds like they're borrowing a little bit of that.
They are.
And thank goodness for that.
Yeah, go look at 40K, as much as I love the game. And
or go look at 3rd edition Age of Sigmar.
yeah, true.
So, for example, charging is now an ability. Nothing's changed. You roll 2d6. You can move a distance up to the charge roll that you roll. One minor thing that has changed is you have to end up within a ½ inch of the enemy.
Yes.
It used to be an inch.
Yes.
Well, that was 40k.
No, so 40K is an inch. Sigmar was a ½ inch.
Yes.
But it does say a visible enemy unit, which means you
Yes.
can't charge at a model you couldn't see.
Right.
Interesting.
Which they have not talked about terrain yet.
They have not.
But terrain has always kind of been an afterthought in Age of Sigmar.
True.
A friend of the show, Kevin, will talk at length about that. Perhaps we'll have him on to do so.
Maybe.
Maybe that means that's changing.
Maybe. We'll see.
And then fighting. The one thing that has changed about fighting is that when you pile in, which you can still move up to 3 inches before you fight, you can't leave combat range with something you started in combat with.
Right.
which is something you can do now, which is charge one thing and then pile into a unit behind it and ignore the first unit.
Yeah.
Which always makes no sense because the first unit's just kind of going like, where are you going? No, now no more of that.
Yeah.
Now, if what you charge, you must fight.
So does that mean that if you're in the middle and you have 2 things you're in melee with, you can't move?
So that is how it works now, kind of.
Well, it depends because it's you have to move closer to the closest unit.
Yes.
But if it's a millimeter closer to the left-hand unit, it could just move over to that one.
So it technically says that each model must end that move no further than the target unit.
Okay.
So you can choose, when your unit is in combat, you pick one enemy unit that your unit is in combat with to be the target of the pile and move.
Interesting.
So actually, yes, you can.
Okay.
You could pile out of, but you can't pile out of combat?
The end of your movement, still be in combat with all the units it was in combat with at the start of the move.
Right. So someone in your unit has to stay in combat.
True.
But it's not that you can't move.
Interesting.
Because that's how it worked for a little while in Age of Sigmar. They changed this pretty recently, which is where you could you could combat lock people.
Yeah.
Just with 2 units and go, oh, you can't move farther away, but you can't use closer. No, just can't move.
Yep.
That sucked.
Yeah.
They got rid of that, and thankfully they've clarified how to get rid of it.
That is definitely a feels bad.
Yes. So that's one thing they've done. They've also specified that now with, again, this is why I thought of the stack, certain combat abilities all happen during the ability phase.
Yes.
Which happens at the start of the combat phase. Both players, starting with the player whose turn it is, resolve all their combat abilities.
Right.
Now the example they give, for example, is that an Ard Boy has Shield Bash where you can smack someone for a mortal wound. That is resolved. And then the other player says, do you want to resolve anything? And every player goes back and forth resolving these abilities, and then fighting happens.
Yes.
So no more like, oh, I resolved this after I fight and this before. No, it's just all the abilities happen first.
They did specifically call out there's no more start of the phase, end of the phase, like what order they go in. It's abilities, combat.
There's a spot in the phase for the abilities to happen.
Yes.
Which I like.
I agree.
Again, it makes it... Anything that's clarification is nice. One of the things you and I talked about when the very recent Slaves to Darkness rules for Dark Oath were revealed, they look fantastic, and also a fantastic example of late edition rules bloat.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got your Wilder Fiend who has 1 sacrifice point. Now, 2 Dark Oath models died, which means you get 2 more sacrifice points. And a Stormcast died, so you get another sacrifice point. Now, when you get 6 sacrifice points, you can...
Yeah. You fulfilled your oath, and now you can get +1 to wound or...
Yeah, exactly. So much tracking, so much guff.
I agree. Too much.
It seems like they're getting rid of some of that, which I'm okay with.
Same. I've always said that Sigmar is a little too complicated right now. Simplifying is better.
Every single game that GW has ever released gets more complicated as they add bloat.
Yep. And then when the edition comes out, they're like, who made our game so complicated? We're going to simplify this.
We're all trying to figure out who bloated the game. This is the man in the hot dog costume.
Exactly.
But, it's them. They've confirmed all attack as all defense is coming back. So, which are stratagems that you use that are abilities.
They also made a very brief mention that you can no longer shoot in combat unless you have the shoot in combat ability.
That is one of the things that I say makes this a bigger change than from 40k 9th to 10th. Because Age of Sigmar has always had, you can shoot in combat.
Yes.
You can't shoot out of combat.
Right. If you're in combat, you can only shoot at the guys you're with.
Right.
You can shoot into a combat if you're not in combat just fine.
And they haven't said whether that's changing.
That's true. That could still be a thing.
Because that's a big difference. But the idea of now being able to charge certain shooting units and actually tie them up.
Right.
It's a huge change for this edition. And a lot of the problem armies, not all, but a lot of the problem armies in Age of Sigmar have been not shooting pure armies, not Caradron, but things like Lumineth or Stormcast, which have a couple really stupid good shooting units.
Yeah, that you just spam and
that you can't tie up.
Yeah.
Because you tie up the Lumineth, they just go, oh, that's
just
really nice there.
I only have 1 target now. They're all dead.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully this will lead to some of that maybe changing.
Yeah, I could agree.
But it will also depend on the war scrolls.
Yeah. If all of those things still have shooting combat, it doesn't change anything.
Right. So they have also changed, or rather called out, that an odd modified 6 is now called a critical hit. which is very 40k.
Yep.
Mortal wounds have been renamed to mortal damage.
Which makes sense to a point.
I get why.
So they changed wounds to health, and they've changed mortal wounds to damage. So what is wounds?
Nothing. To wound.
A wound roll. That's fair.
Well, and I do know some new players who are like, okay, this is my wound roll, so that affects my wounds. When I got to the armor save. What?
Yeah, that's fair.
There is something to be said for the same word not being used over and over again.
And I like that.
They, very similar to 40k, they've said that rend has been reduced throughout the game, and that save stacking is mostly gone. We'll see. Because they said that about a 40k, and I'm over here laughing in an armor of contempt.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this about 40k, but rerolls are much less prominent throughout this edition.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, so...
Someone did point out that it's like, okay, guys, rend is much less prevalent, and they've shown us 3 war scrolls, all of which have rend, one of which has 2 rend on it, which was more than it had before.
Not for these guys.
And the Kroxigor is getting +1 rend against infantry.
To be fair,
everything's fine.
The Kroxigor is going from one of the worst models in the game.
Needed it.
Yeah.
So could be cherry picking here, but like they go, hey, there's less rend, and all we've seen so far is rend.
So speaking of Kroxigors, I guess we'll talk about that now.
Yeah.
2 things. Number 1, they said that there's a change in how damage is allocated, but don't panic. It's not what you're worried about.
Yes.
We're not going to 40k damages.
Which is good.
Damage is now allocated to a unit and not a model.
Yes.
When the damage reaches the health threshold of a model in the model is pulled.
Take a model.
And then you restart. I like this.
I agree. I think that is a very clean change.
Yes.
And I would honestly be okay with that, introducing that to other games.
Yes. It makes it so much better going, okay, I'm going to put the wound on that one.
Yeah.
And then you move the unit, and you better hope that that wound marker follows that stupid
that particular
fire slayer,
guy.
Right.
Now it's just this unit has taken 3 wounds, and once they hit the 4th wound, take a guy off.
Yes.
Easy.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
We'll go ahead and flip over to Kroxigor now, because they've talked about that there are now... This is functionally the way that they were saying in 40k, anti-vehicle means anti-vehicle and anti-infantry means anti-infantry. Now in 40k, it's difficult to assess how that's actually worked out because they overtuned the absolute bejesus out of vehicles.
Yes.
So anti-infantry doesn't matter. That's a little bit of an overstatement, but there's no tanks in this game.
There's no tanks in this game.
But we have seen a couple of abilities. We've seen something that I really, really love, which is anti-charge +1 rend.
That is cool. That I like a lot.
It's something that... It's in Total War Warhammer, the video game. If you want to stop large units, you take a spear unit, you have to make sure they're not moving, and you stand there. Because that's how a spear roll works.
Exactly.
Charging, it's usually bad. It's something that has not existed in Age of Sigmar since the Cities of Sigmar first book, when Free Guild spears got +1 to wound against models that charged them that turn.
That's impressive.
Yes.
So I did play some, not fantasy battles, but 9th Age, and spears work very similar in that, where it was if you are charged and you have a spear, like horses wouldn't get their bonus to charge or whatever.
Right.
Awesome. I love
the charge bonus.
Yeah.
It's because they pointed out that now that everyone's got 3-inch range, what does a spear matter? Because previously, a spear was usually worse to hit or wound, or both, but you get to poke farther. Now, it's something like when someone charges you, you get +1 rend against them, which kind of makes sense because you're ramming into somebody who's holding like a stick out like this.
I have a sword. Get closer.
Right. So stuff like that. We've also seen the anti-infantry +1 rend, so against the infantry keyword.
It's not the same as anti-infantry or anti-vehicle is in 40k.
Right.
It is you get a bonus depending on what you're attacking.
But that might also exist.
That might also exist.
Because it says anti-infantry parentheses +1 rend.
Yeah, I like the variability of this.
I'm going to bet that means that we also have anti-infantry +1 wound. Anti-monster +1 wound.
+1 damage.
+1 damage. The Kroxigor, the reason we talked about them, add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons for attacks that target an enemy unit that has 10 or more models. The way damage is applied in Age of Sigmar means that still carries over. I like that. I like that more than the more hits for more models thing, because that didn't seem to actually help that much.
Yeah, fair. So yeah, these guys are particularly interesting because they have 2 different weapons, which we haven't seen yet.
Nope.
one of which goes on, not the leader, I guess, but there's one that has a special hammer, whatever,
Yes.
with +1 to hit, +1 damage, which is nice. And then that damage is increased against 10 or more models. So really good at like sweeping them.
Yeah, which is good because that feels like something that that model should be able to do.
I agree.
Now, 2 last changes. The one Mitchell does not like, and I'm on coherency range. So coherency previously in this current edition is 1 inch. It's now ½ an inch.
GWY.
Models of 7 or more, so specifically avoiding those double 3 models units.
Yeah.
That's why have to be within coherency of 2 of their friends. And some certain units, like Stormdrake Guard, they call out, have larger coherency.
Which makes sense, because you like physically could not put 2 Stormdrake Guard within ½ an inch of each other.
No. Excuse me, pardon me.
I am imagining a 20 block of rats, and they're just like...
Which I think is the point.
Yes, but that doesn't mean I have to like it.
So there's a couple things that I think they're going for with this. Number one, they're looking to decrease the unit footprint.
Yes.
Because they've done 2 things for this. Number one, they've done this. And number 2, they called out there is no more double reinforcing.
Right.
So I don't think we're going to be seeding units of 40 clan rats anymore.
Probably not, but if someone's going to do it, it's going to be either some kind of undead or Skaven that are, because they currently have minimum 20-man units.
I'm going to bet that's going to go down to 10.
And I would be okay with that. I would have no problem with that. But a ½ an inch coherency range is too small, in my opinion.
So my problem with the ½ inch coherency range is it's a pain in the butt to measure.
It is.
With a ruler or a tape measure.
Yes.
My positiveness for it, though, is that I like smaller footprint things.
Sure.
Because I get what they're going for. It means that a single unit has less thin control. Like, it only has a lot of control when it's actually larger. Basically, a unit has to be actually larger of more models to exercise more control.
Okay.
Instead of just being able to exercise more space by thinning themselves out. Which, on the one hand, that is a thing you could do in real life. Not that real life is something that you should be taking for inspiration from Age of Sigmar. In real life, my Ratman could. No.
Yeah. The dragons would not fly over me.
Right. In real life, no. So I kind of like that. It's like, oh, I have a single screening unit of 10 men who's a single man thick.
Yeah.
Because that always felt kind of gamey. And I realize it is a game.
Yeah.
But the 10-man screening units who were like, whoop, always felt very gamey in a way that was not satisfying to me.
Sure.
This having a 20-man unit to do the same thing means it's more beefy. It looks more like this is my actual screen of rats. Yes, they suck, but there's 20 of them. Go.
Yeah.
The other thing they're doing is I think this has connection with something like charge through or push through.
Okay.
Because now there is, you mentioned this is kind of like a rank and flank. Kind of. And it sort of is. There is some, like...
There's a moderate amount of wiggle room, but not a lot.
Not a ton, although there is more than rank and flank, where it has to be...
Rank and flank is touching base to base, but
Right.
like this feels like within a... You have to be within... It's hard to represent on camera.
Yes.
2 models, and then a third model has to be in coherency with the other 2 models.
Yes.
And in order to put another model in there, they have to be like...
Staggered.
Staggered or like some... It just feels very, very close.
It does feel restrictive.
Yeah.
I guess I don't mind that. I get what they're going for. One thing is that, especially with shooting models now being able to be tagged, it's clear they're doubling down on this is a much more melee-centric game.
Sure.
Which I like.
I agree.
And, again, real life is not the reason here, but melee combat does tend to take place in ranks.
Yeah.
Or blobs like that. And having, like, the thin one-man line of that is not really something that looks good.
Sure.
And it also gives more choice to something like push through, where you could, because push through is 3 inches. Now you have the ability to more, like, it's restricting your ability to respond to that.
Okay.
Besides just being able to, like, daisy chain out a single model so that the 3 inch is weird.
Yes.
I think that's what they're going for.
Of the points that you have made about this, I like that point the most.
Now, whether or not this actually works, I think I have to play to see.
Right.
For a couple reasons. Number one, I need to see unit sizes. Number two, I need to see what other abilities they have. Number three, I need to see what the heck they were talking about when they talked about abilities being 3 inches.
Yes. I want to see how many units have different coherency.
Correct.
Like, what if clan rats have 2-inch instead of 1?
Yeah.
Or instead of a half? What if, I don't know, like some really small unit has a 3-inch coherency?
And I don't think you'll see that.
I don't think so either, but they could do anything they want.
Right. I also really need to see magic.
Yeah, they did mention at the end of this they're doing magic.
Magic is next. I really need to see that, because how does that... this whole block thing also, I believe, I don't know this, but I think they are going to be massively reducing the size of auras and abilities. And this lets them do that in a way that enforces players playing in a way that still makes use of them.
Sure.
Without players stringing out a 10-man unit and going, no, I can't fit everybody in my aura. And it's not them screaming at their Twitch stream going, that's because you didn't do it right, Jimmy.
And I feel like they went in that direction with the introduction of Holy Within.
Yeah.
Because they usually like increase the range by 6 inches and
Yep.
then said have to be Holy Within.
Yes.
Which is already going to preventing the stringing out.
But it didn't do it enough, because you still see a lot of stringing out.
I don't think that's coherency problems.
I don't know if it is coherency problems, but it's the way they're choosing to approach fixing it.
And I disagree.
Well, too bad, Mitchell. It's there.
It's not my game. Nothing I can do about it.
Mitchell walks out. Guess I'm not playing it as a...
We should play our next 40k game with half-inch coherency and see how that works out.
Okay, my tank will not care.
That's fair.
Mitchell, I have one unit in my entire army that cares about coherency.
That's
the rest are Iron Storm,
All right,
Attachment.
I'll play GSC, and I'll complain about it the whole time.
You have fun with that.
Anyway.
All right. Well, speaking of Mitchell leaving, retreating. This was also huge.
Yeah, I really like this change.
This one's weird. So retreating is now an ability used in the movement phase. It just says in the movement phase.
Doesn't, I think it's color-coded. I think the black is at the end of the phase.
Yes, it's your movement phase.
Yes.
And it's at the end of your movement phase, which is also interesting, because that means that if there's things that trigger off of that, you can't retreat until last. Basically, you can only retreat if you're in combat. Duh. And now, you just make your move characteristic. You can move through the combat ranges of other enemies, and you take D3 mortal wounds. Sorry, mortal damage.
Mortal damage. Yes, I actually really like this a lot.
This is combining something they played with in 40k, where in 40k, if you try and retreat when you're battle shocked,
Yes.
you take some damage. The thing about retreating is there's no such thing in I keep saying this, in real life, which again, I cannot stress, is not
how you should measure your war game.
But the idea that I'm a Stormcast and you're a Clan Rat, and I'm going like this, and then you start retreating, I'll just go,
Bye.
peace. No, it's like, oh, you're running...
Yeah, there's attacks of opportunity in D&D.
Right, attacks of opportunity. Necromunda has the initiative thing. Moving away from someone who's trying to kill you gives them a shot at trying to kill you.
They don't just go like, "Aww, he ran away."
It's not my movement phase.
Yeah.
No, it invokes opportunity, no matter how large you are.
Yeah.
Now, if you're super large, D3 Mortals doesn't mean much.
Yeah. Just gonna scratch you on the ankles as you walk away.
But it might mean much.
If you're down to 1 wound,
and you try and leave,
you can't. You're
right.
stuck.
So, because first off, D3 Mortals means it, unlike even Necromunda or attacks of opportunity, it guarantees
at least 1 damage.
at least 1 dead clan rat
Yep.
as the tax for removing.
Something I actually, in our talk about this just now, I'm noticing is this is an action at the end of the active player's movement phase, which means they can flee, and then your opponent can do actions at the end of the movement phase as well. Like, what's the one? Tactical retreat, the other one.
Countercharge?
No, that's the end of the charge phase.
Yeah, that's
The one where if the old one, they get closer to you and you back away.
Oh, redeploy.
Redeploy. So they could retreat and you can redeploy because you're the second player going.
But it's still your turn.
It's still your turn. Like, the tactics behind when these trigger is very
It
interesting.
allows a lot more you do, I do.
Yes.
Like reaction to your reaction.
Which I'm okay with.
Like, kind of like Magic.
Yep.
Like, it's the one thing I like about that game, even though I don't play it much.
I've heard some people compare this to the Middle-earth strategy battle game.
Yes.
Because they have a lot of, for those of you who don't know, it is the movement phase. The active player moves, the opposing player moves. Then the shooting phase. The active player shoots, the opposing player shoots, which they're doing a lot of that in this. It's all command point based.
They won't give up the you do everything, I do everything turn structure of
Yes.
Warhammer, but they're slowly eroding it.
They're inching towards it. And
chipping away.
in the Middle-earth strategy battle game, you can spend points in order to, like, if I'm first and I want to move, but Josh really, really wants to get that move, he can spend a point to move before me.
But you can then spend a point to move before my move.
Yes, it's the very reactive, like, spending of resources. I like a lot about that game, and I like it here too.
And keep in mind that you have a much more limited amount of command points.
Yes.
And the command points disappear every round. There's no more banking 12 of them for round 4 and then going...
Well, you couldn't do that in 3rd edition anyway.
No.
But like in 40k, you can get to the end of round 5 and be like, "Wow, I haven't spent any command points today, and I'm winning. Here goes all my CP." But yeah, the fact that you get a limited amount, but they reset every round, makes you really, really want to spend those points, which makes a reactive game.
Yes.
Whereas sometimes it's like, oh, well, if I do this now, I can't do this later.
It's the JRPG problem. Well, I have to save this uber health potion for the last boss fight, and then you get the last boss fight. Well, if I there's another boss fight, and then the game's over, and you got 5 dead party members and 1 billion health potions.
Exactly. Or the Skyrim and infinite blocks of cheese.
Or we just do that for fun.
But yeah, I can see that being like an actually interesting thing that you just want to spend every time because they go away and you get more.
Yes.
Unlike in 40k.
40k tried it,
Yes.
and it's better in 40k.
Yes.
It is more reactive now, but it still is very much you do your thing, and I'm kind of sitting there rolling an armor safe. They're very clearly trying to not have the you do your entire turn while I roll armor saves.
Yep.
Because they lose people like that. I think they finally understand that that's not what people really want to play. People want to go back and forth.
And I also like the availability for both.
Yes.
Like if you want more of that, 40k is there, and if you want more
Or Old
reactive, or Old World, or if you, especially Old World, Jesus, or if you want a more reactive playstyle, then Sigmar is there. I don't like when they get too close together.
No, and this article, I think, is the one that made me look at this and go, oh, so anybody who says that Age of Sigmar is getting more like 40k
Is just wrong.
is just wrong. Because they're looking at 40k and going, y'all have fun over there. Here's this thing we're doing that is nothing like that.
Yeah.
Because the way this plays, the structure, is so completely entirely different.
Yep.
Just everything is just like, no, they didn't add a wound roll, or a 2-wound, toughness chart.
Yeah.
They didn't add those things that people said they were going to add. No, it's just like, we're Age of Sigmar now. We're doing our own things.
Yeah.
Double turn's here to stay.
And it's cool.
Yeah. This is one of the articles that has made me most pumped for this mission.
Interestingly, this one, except for the coherency, was good.
That's the one I gotta see.
Yeah. The previous one that we kind of mentioned here, the command points one, was like the one for me where I was like, I'm gonna like this game a lot more.
Yeah. And we'll keep talking about it.
We will.
As more news comes out, obviously we're both going to be getting Skaven, and then I guess throwing away a bunch of golden boys. Except the random tangent. They now, specifically in like the lore articles, no longer call them the golden Stormcast. They call them silver.
Really?
Shining silver hosts.
That's funny.
So
oh yeah, the silver host, that makes sense.
Gold is no longer the poster color.
Nope, it's gone. Good, it was ugly anyway.
Yes, it was. So that's it from us this week for Age of Sigmar. We'll talk to you when we get more big news next week, which hopefully will be about magic, prayers, and manifestations, which is their...
I'm gonna guess endless spells?
We're not losing endless spells, but what form will they be in?
Yeah, we'll see.
I look forward to that. Until next time.
Bye.